Joining me now is Lateshia Beachum. She's a federal politics reporter for Center for Public Integrity, and she's written about transgender political candidates and movement. Lateshia, welcome to the Young Turks.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So, how many transgender Americans ran for office in 2018, and how many won?
Yes, so at least 51 ran last year and 0 won, and 9 at the congressional level, and none of those 9 even secured a party vote, and none of them also made it past their primary.
Yes. Now, they didn't get a lot of press coverage outside of the Young Turks. We had Brianna Westbrook and Christine Hallquist, et cetera, on many times. And I believe they're definitely going to break through. I think they're amazing candidates and have great stories and have the right policies. But it was tough, and it's tough for a number of reasons. One of them is obvious, the bias that still exists in the country. But the other one is about money. So let's talk about how disadvantaged they were in terms of fundraising.
Right. So with transgender candidates, they don't have anything that's really dedicated to them. You have this one PAC, Trans United Fund, that does exist, but just like the transgender community at large in America, they suffer from a lot of things, whether that is poverty, lack of education, employment. So if you have a small segment of the population that does not have money, what will that mean for you politically? And what we really wanted to do with this story is talk about a little bit, what does it mean when you don't have the financial capital to really play in democracy on the federal level?
Yeah, and so the situation for Trans United Fund is not great, right? So I want to talk about that and give people context as to why these losses might have happened. And by the way, there's Victories the year before for trans candidates. So we'll come back and talk about that as well and see what the difference is. But yes, so how bad a financial shape is the Trans United Fund?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. They really just don't have a lot of money. I stated in my piece that they haven't raised a single federal dollar since they formed in 2016. Now, they have raised a lot of money on the local level, which is where you saw part of the victory with Philippe Cunningham running for city council in Minneapolis, as well as Andrea Jenkins. However, none of that has translated to a viable congressional candidate, and also none of that has transferred to having a donor who's willing to support them on the congressional level. So as of now, the last time I checked their FEC records, there is no money in the bank. And actually, they made a mistake with contributing to Alexandra Chandler's campaign because they gave a contribution to her campaign from their C4 arm, which is illegal. So it still is very much a startup organization. They're still trying to figure out what they're doing. And in the process, they're not really having a lot of donor support to help them wade through the water of electoral spending.
Yeah, but Lateshia, couldn't Caitlyn Jenner just chip in here? I hear she cares a lot about the cause.
I hear that as well, but I don't know if she would pass Trans United Fund's litmus test on policies. Caitlyn is not, last I checked, she's not pro-immigration. She's been a staunch Trump supporter. And while Trans United Fund says that it is nonpartisan in that degree of the candidates it will support, it still considers itself to be a very Black, a very trans-centric, pro-immigrant experience organization. And based on Caitlyn Jenner's track record, I don't know if she would align with their ideology.
Yeah, it's kind of sad that one person in the country is making a good deal of money, trumpeting her transgender status while not supporting any of the other policies that affects that community. And in the beginning, when she was a huge Trump fan, not even supporting the policy, basically going against the policies of the transgender community itself, whether you have difference on immigration or not. Trump is incredibly anti-transgender in his decisions. But you brought up something in your story that I had not considered, and I thought it was really interesting and powerful. The second problem that transgender candidates have is they don't have a lot of personal wealth. And it's not just the Republican Party, Democratic Party too. When they're choosing candidates, the first thing they ask is, how much money do you have? And then how many people do you know that have a lot of money? Those are literally the first two questions that they ask. So that's gonna put, on average, transgender folks at a huge disadvantage, isn't it?
Yes, it definitely is. And I found the perfect example of that in the candidate profiles that were in my piece of Deja Alvarez, who is running for city council at large in Philadelphia. And she's been very active in the LGBTQ plus community in Philadelphia, whether that is HIV/AIDS awareness to stopping harassment from police. And when she went through a recent candidate training, the stress was on the dollars. And the stress usually comes from candidates across the aisles, I would say. Who do you know? And who do they know? Go all the way back to elementary school and try to connect with that person and see if you can hit them up for money. But if you're coming from a community, especially a newly formed community, because Deja's not originally from Philadelphia, you don't have that network. And so what do you do when you don't have that network? You don't have that support. You can't call up anyone to say, hey, can you give me $100,000 for my campaign? And the answer is you try to figure it out and you try to get some backup support. But right now, if you don't have those connections, as a lot of people in the transgender community don't, you will definitely be at a disadvantage.
Right, and the Democratic establishment talks a lot about how they're for gay rights, but when it comes to picking candidates, we have, at a bare minimum, accidental discrimination against transgender people in this country, and I'm being kind by putting it that way. Whereas Justice Democrats had several transgender candidates. Why? Is it because they wanted to make sure to get diversity? Maybe partly, but no, it's not the main reason why. The main reason why was because they were the best candidates in that race, and we didn't mind that they didn't have money. See, that's the biggest difference between progressives and Democratic establishment. So, okay, now I want to go to the victories though. So there were some famous victories in the last 2 years for trans candidates. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so of course I would say arguably the most famous that people know is Danica Broman, and Trans United Fund definitely did give to her campaign $5,000. And there's of course Breonna Westbrook, and then you have a few other local victories, and Trans United Fund was a part of that. But one thing that struck me in my reporting and after speaking with Hayden is how important being intersectional is to them. Hayden said to me, and it's in the story as well, that one of the reasons why they didn't give to Rome as much as they did to Philippe Cunningham, who's the first Black transgender man elected to office ever, and Andrea Jenkins, who was the first Black trans woman elected to office in Minneapolis as well, is because they are at the forefront of what they deem as priority politics. And part of that is making sure that you put front and center people who are the most marginalized. And to Trans United Fund, Danica Broman, even though she is a transgender woman, she is white. And another thing that really struck me in my reporting as well was, of the 9 candidates that did run for congressional office last year, they were also white, and many were from wealthy backgrounds, right? And so you will see victories on the local level. The challenge is, how do you create a Philippe Cunningham? How do you recreate, I should say, an Andrea Jenkins on a national level? And after speaking with Trans United Fund and other candidates, there is a huge sense of awareness that the national level is not completely out of scope, but how to tackle that beast is definitely going to be an uphill battle.
Well, what's going on in Minneapolis that 2 out of the 13 city council members are transgender, when there's very little victories anywhere else in the country? Why Minneapolis?
Right, and I remember asking Philippe Cunningham this. I said, why would you want to live there? It's cold, and I don't think of like other Black people. But Philippe definitely brought something up to me, which is that Minneapolis was actually one of the first places, even before the federal government, to bar discrimination against gender expression. And so that, what you're seeing now between Philippe and Andrea, is kind of a byproduct of a history of a of a city that has been a little bit ahead of the curve nationally as far as its acceptance of LGBTQ plus people and allowing people to live how they want to live.
I have a little bit more hope too, because for example, Christine Hallquist was not a national candidate. She was candidate for governor in the state of Vermont, but she did win her primary. And so she was a Democratic candidate in that race. So I see some progress, not just in Minneapolis, but they are definitely leading in this category. Lateshia Beachum, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.